podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon and I am a relationship expert, international speaker and best-selling author of the book Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news, TV or social media, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories and listen to what real people think, do or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. And here today, we are going to talk about relationships at work and debunking the leadership myths with Paul Kinkaid. Hi, Paul.
Hey, how are you?
I'm okay, thanks. You?
Yeah, living the dream.
I know. This is recorded in the middle of a lockdown, which is great. So tell us a bit about yourself, please.
Yeah, so I'm Paul. I run a company called Selfless Leadership Group, and the sort of clues in the question there. We develop leaders at every level of leadership, from first-time line manager all the way through to C-suite and execs. Like you, international speaker, do all sorts of stuff around the leadership domain, and that comes from a career of 20 years in the military, where I was an British Army officer, designing leadership programs all around the world, and leading in some pretty cheeky environments.
I can imagine, especially in the army. So to you, define leadership. What is it?
Oh, do you know, that's a cracking question. If you Google that, you'll come up with millions.
That's what I mean.
Of definitions. Yeah. So there's one definition out there that I really like, and it breaks it down and it says it's a reciprocal relationship between those who choose to lead and those who decide to follow. So it's a two-way thing. You've got to make a decision to step up and lead and choose to lead, but other people have got to decide to follow you. And that brings it straight back to the title of your podcast. It is all about relationships with people. Yeah.
And one of the questions I have, because of my, previous corporate background, do you think that anyone can be a leader?
As long as they want to be, then yes. So that comes down to one of our central philosophy in the business is that great leadership comes from a position of care. If you don't care about those people around you, you're not leading, you're managing. You're probably doing it very, very well, but you're not leading. You've got to care, because it was all about people. So if you want to be a leader and you've got the will to lead and you've got that inherent care and empathy about you, then yes, anyone can be a leader. I don't agree with this nature over nurture. Are leaders born or are they made? Some people are born with leadership skills inherent within them, but they've still got to be developed over time. And every leader's got to be developed over time.
And I think that sometimes one thing that is really difficult. So if I just use an example of when I was back in that kind of world, I was a manager. I had the south east of England as an area, shall we say?
Yeah.
Some of the decisions were made by the company that owned my company somewhere in America. And I think to sell that idea to the people on the ground was really difficult, because it's not that they didn't make me a leader, but I was having to get them to buy into something I wasn't necessarily buying into myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really difficult position. So there's also this thing called 10 diseases of leadership. And one of those is consent and evade, which is agreeing to a policy in the room and then walking out of the room and saying, that's rubbish, I'm not doing that. That's a really difficult thing to avoid, especially if you fundamentally disagree with the policy in the first instance, which is when you've got to step up as a leader and display that thing called moral courage, which is the ability to step up and say, regardless of the impact it might have on you as an individual, which is a big, tough call to make.
Yeah, definitely.
Is to say, do you know what? I don't agree with that decision for the following reasons. Because it's the impact it's going to have on the shop floor or with the troops or with the wider staff cohort is negative. So, perhaps there's a different way we can skin that. That's a really difficult thing. And that's why, leaders in industry are paid more than those around them, because they have to make the difficult decisions. But when you see them not making the difficult decisions and just going with it, just being a yes person, that's when it starts to rub, isn't it?
Yeah. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who do that.
So that's where I come back to the will to lead and the leadership from a position of care. A lot of these people are senior managers, but I would argue they're not leaders. They just want the extra salary. They possibly don't want the responsibility. They want the car parking space nearer the front door. That sort of the stigma and that goes attached with being a senior leader.
So what can they do
Mm-hmm.
to be better leaders? Obviously, it goes back to relationships, but give us a few of the things that you believe in.
Aside from that central tenet of leading from a position of care, I think there are three fundamental things that leaders must do in order to lead well. The first is be generous. And what I mean by that is generous with your own knowledge, skills, and experiences in order that you can coach and mentor those around you, and your time. It's too easy to say, I don't have time to do that, but you can actually squeeze an awful lot into 5 or 10 minutes. A quick chat with someone is priceless. So generosity is the first one. Empathy is the second one that I mentioned earlier. And that's the ability to understand the impact of your actions and other people's actions on those around them, and understand how people might be feeling. Not feel it with them. That's sympathy. And that's not necessarily a great leadership trait, to be fair. But empathy, understand how people feel about certain things, especially now during this lockdown. You understand what people are doing, and then it comes back to the care. And then the third thing is, which some people might be surprised to hear, given what I've just said, is a relentless pursuit of excellence, both for yourself and those around you. So as a leader, you've got to continue growing. You've got to be the best leader you can be. And so keep reading, keep studying, keep talking to people around you, seek out mentors, coaches, but also seek out excellence for those around you. And if you need to lose someone to go off on a course to make them better, then, so be it. So it's that generosity, empathy, and excellence, I think, really underpin care as a leader. That's, I'd hang my hat on that all day long.
Yeah. And I think that one of the issues is that a lot of people are scared to develop their own people because they're scared that they're going to get replaced.
Yeah, there's definitely that. There's that. It's quite a toxic environment to be in, and it starts to impact on well-being, people's mental health, all that kind of stuff, which is desperately important, and it's an absolute function of leadership. But wouldn't it be great if people come to work to complain about home rather than go home to complain about work?
Yeah.
If people want to be at work and they're saying, oh, do you know what? I can't believe what the kids did last night, or you never guess what the dog chewed last night, or, what he did or she did, whoever it is. Wouldn't that be great that people feel that comfortable in work to be able to talk like that because they're cared for, they're not judged, and everyone can just speak openly like that?
And I think another one of the issues sometimes is that they don't feel that they can say or share ideas that would make the workplace a better place or would make some systems easier. Now, in one of the companies I worked for, they had this thing called the Red Book, and people were encouraged to put their ideas in the Red Book, and every quarter or whatever, one would be picked and would get 250 quid in vouchers or whatever. Some of them were a bit mental, I'm not going to lie. They were never going to work. But some others were actually, really easy to implement. They were free to implement, and they were from people at the bottom of the ladder, as it were, but who knew how to make the work better.
Yeah, there's not enough listening to everybody. No one in the so let's say the company is 50 people or 100 people strong. The number is irrelevant, but you've got 5 people on the board. Why do you employ that many brains and only allow 5 of them to make the decisions? You need to get everyone's voices heard. In fact, through an old school suggestion box or a red book, or so be it. But much better actually to have an open discussion in open forum where people feel, and that, the new phrase is psychological safety. So that people have got the safety to question decisions, present their own ideas. Just because you're a senior leader and you're paid your pop star wages doesn't mean you've got the monopoly on good ideas.
Exactly.
Listen to everybody.
Exactly that. Another thing as well that people or so-called leaders say quite a bit is, don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions.
I hate that.
It used to wind me up.
Yeah, I don't like it. It immediately means that someone who's got a genuine problem and is genuinely stuck and can't for the life of them see a way out of it, they're not going to knock on the door. But ironically, I bet those people were the same ones who said, "Oh, my door's always open," which clearly it wasn't. Yeah, as a leader, you're also a coach, a mentor, a confidant. So people should be able to come to you and say, "Listen, I've got a real problem. I don't know. I haven't got a clue what to do." The leader then steps into that coaching, mentoring space and starts to, in a safe environment, starts to tease out of them what they might do, and help that individual grow and develop into that problem space. You don't step down necessarily and solve it for them, of course. And that's kind of what that individual's getting at by saying, "Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions." But that's a really unhelpful phrase, because it closes conversations down before they even start.
And the thing is, sometimes, in all aspects of life, we can feel a bit lost. And it's because we're too much in the problem. Just by sharing it, all of a sudden the solution presents itself, but you've got to be able to share it.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's the beauty of coaching, is to hear your own voice presenting something outside of your body. Quite often you'll solve it yourself, exactly as you say. Just, and a professionally qualified coach myself, and just by asking some deep searching questions, more often than not, the individual knows or can work out the solution, but they need a guide. We don't know our way everywhere in the UK or everyone in the world. That's why we have SatNav. So we type in SatNav and it helps us get to the destination. Well, that's a coach. The coach is the SatNav. I need to get somewhere in my career or solve this problem. Okay, well, how about if we turn left? What happens? What happens if we turn left? Oh, well, what happens if we turn right? It's a silly example, but it kind of gets there, that actually the coach is the SatNav in the conversation.
And sometimes it's about getting people to look at things from a different angle, because they're so, again, wrapped in their own thing that, one of the things I'm doing at the moment with a lot of people is challenging their own beliefs. Because some of our beliefs are neither right nor wrong anyway. They're just there because that's all we know.
Exactly. We've got to push people outside comfort zones. It's possible for leadership teams to get into this thing called groupthink, where they all know how each other thinks anyway. So it's really important, exactly as you've just said, to disrupt our own thinking and organizational thinking as well. And that's done by what we spoke about earlier. You bring up ideas from the shop floor who actively disrupt that thought process, because it's important. Otherwise, you only get what you were going to get anyway. By disrupting it, you might end up with a better solution.
Better, yeah. And so how do you set direction as a leader?
You've got to, you've got to communicate really clearly a compelling message. And that comes down to storytelling, not, once upon a time, Jack and Ori stuff, but it comes down to, right, what is it we want to achieve? And that thing has, again, got three elements as far as I'm concerned. It's got to be aspirational, in terms of it's got to be not easy to achieve, because, if you were to get a medal every time you got out of bed in the morning, those medals would soon lose their significance. But you get a medal for finishing the London Marathon, that's something to put up and hang up. So that's aspirational. It's got to be inspirational. People have got to want to join you on that journey. There you go. I've said the journey word. We can tick that box. It's got to be inspirational to get people out of bed to want to come to work or walk to the laptop across the room or whatever it is at the moment in lockdown. And the third thing, I think, it's got to be transparent. You've got to communicate how and where everyone in that story can be the hero. Because if I'm the hero in Act 1, Scene 1, I need to know that I can also support other people. Or if I'm going to be the hero later on in the story and I know people are supporting me the whole way along, I know my time will come. And you only get that through transparency.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, as you just mentioned about lockdown, walking across to the laptop, it's about motivating people to keep on doing what they used to do in an office environment. Because if you go back a few years ago, when you said you were going to work from home, people looked at you like, yeah, whatever, you're having a day off. Yeah. Where now the trust has had to be given because there is an alternative.
Yeah, absolutely. So productivity hasn't really dropped that significantly through lockdown, but what has is the central topic of this conversation, and that is relationships.
Yeah.
Relationships have been damaged, but equally, some relationships have grown. So I think on the whole, if we have the choice post-lockdown to work from home and or be in the office, or a hybrid blended mix of that, where you still get your interpersonal relationships in person, warm bodies in one space, fantastic. Because, we're humans. We're a tribal group.
We're not made to be solitary, are we?
No, exactly that. So it's really important to have those relationships, even if it's, just going for a coffee in the morning with a friend and say, oh, you never guess what happened at home last night. And just that time to decompress, because at the moment we're all living in pressure cookers and everyone's struggling to some extent or another. I would challenge anyone to say they're having a fantastic time, because there are times when you just want to get out and have a beer or, go for a walk or meet a mate for coffee and cake or whatever that might be. But we can't do that. And for good reason at the moment. I'm not suggesting we should be allowed to do that at the moment. Absolutely not. But we're struggling. We're struggling with it.
And, talking of this, it's a weird one, because I think some relationships in the workplace have gone down because we're not forced to see each other all the time, shall we say. But others have grown, because I certainly know of some people I'm working with at the moment who have said that actually it's allowed them to have to talk to some people they would normally avoid, but because we didn't have a choice, and they found a level.
Yeah. There's something else that I talk about relatively often as a result of this lockdown and technology, that, you and I are having this conversation now, and it might well be that we find things out and we talk more openly than we would do in the office. So leaders especially now know things that they didn't know before about their people. You can't unknow those.
No.
So we have the opportunity to be better, to lead better as a result of lockdown, because we know things that we didn't know before. And I think if we can maintain momentum along those style of conversations, whereby we do share when things are struggling, we open up and be a bit more vulnerable, especially as leaders. It's really important for a leader to be vulnerable when they are vulnerable. We don't want a leader who's going to cry in their tea every 5 minutes. That's not the vulnerability I'm talking about. But if there's a leader you don't know, say you don't know. There's no strength. There's nothing to be gained from pretending you know everything. And open it up. And that's when decisions come. And as one human to another, when you're vulnerable, beautiful things happen. People open up.
And the funny thing is, when they say lead by example, exactly that. If you're showing that you also have a soft side to people, because I find that a lot in the coaching work that I do, to get people to open up about certain things, I share about me. And the minute I do that, they feel more comfortable. And it's the same in a working relationship. If you see someone can be vulnerable, but still walking the talk, so to speak, then you are more likely, A, to respect them, and two, to open up to them as well.
Yeah, I agree. And isn't it odd? We've now gone full circle back to that. You asked me what the definition of leadership was. Yeah. It's a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah.
So, if you show some vulnerability when it's real and true, then you'll get vulnerability and authenticity back. And that's really important, that people know who you are and what you stand for.
Do you think that some people can get promoted beyond their capability, so to speak?
Yeah, definitely. There's the Peter principle. I don't know if you've heard of that. And it's where, you get promoted to your own level of incompetence because you then stop performing. Yeah, we've all seen that. If I was to say no, people would be throwing stones or stop listening to your podcast because you've got a charlatan who's lying on it. Yeah, we've all seen people who are promoted beyond their level of capability. We absolutely have. And sometimes, rarely, people put their hands up and say, do you know what, I can't cope with this anymore.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be great if that organisation allowed them, without any judgment, to step back down again to where they were really good? Part of the problem in the UK especially, well, globally actually,
pride, isn't it?
It is a bit of that, but it's also, we promote people in the UK through, I don't know why I keep saying UK, people globally are promoted through time in service, or you've been here a long time, so you can now be the head, you've been in the programming department a long time, so you can now be head of programming, or through technical competence. You're the best programmer we've got, therefore you're going to be head of programming. But you might not have what we spoke about earlier on. Exactly. If you haven't got the will to lead, you're not going to be leading. And therefore you're putting yourself, or you are being put in a position whereby you are, through no fault of your own, incompetent. You will struggle, and so will the rest of the team, because they're not getting the direction, guidance and support they need. So we're much better to promote according to strength rather than technical capability or longevity in post.
And I recall a police officer I knew, and he never got promoted. And I remember someone saying to me, Jesus Christ, if he's been in there for 22 years, he can't have been really good if he stayed where he was. And that was a perception. But I had spoken to him previously about it, and it was purely that becoming a sergeant was of no relevance to him. It was a different job. It was filling paperwork, and he hated that.
Yeah. If it goes back to will to lead, doesn't it? If he didn't want to have a higher rank and was very happy where he was, leave him there. He's a great police officer.
Yeah.
Knows the job inside out after 22 years. Why would you want him to promote on? He can be a tutor constable to other young police officers coming in. So I think we're too quick to judge. We're too quick to promote. And some people, easier said than done. I'm looking back on a career rather than starting one. So it's very easy. I've got a different point of reference to younger people who might be listening to this. But take your time, enjoy it a little bit. Because you're better to get that depth of knowledge and enjoy the journey rather than feel under pressure the whole time.
But a lot of young people who start out want it like yesterday. They want to get promoted ASAP. They want to be the youngest one that ever got to there or whatever.
Yeah, sure. And there's nothing wrong with ambition. And if, why not? Why not have ambition and pursue that and, relentless pursue excellence? So that's what I spoke about earlier on. But, that you can afford to take time and enjoy it as well. Enjoy the ride. Don't just hold on tight and scream if you want to go faster.
And I think sometimes it's about actually reassessing what you really want. Because if I just look at myself, I wanted to be that person. I was that person. I wanted to be managing director of whatever. It didn't matter. I wanted to get to the top. And the truth was, as I was climbing up the food chain, I liked it less and less and less and less.
Yeah.
And there's a point you have to be honest with yourself. It wasn't for me.
I think that self-awareness is absolutely critical as a leader again, being aware of what messages you're sending out and what messages you're sending yourself. Because we all have multiple voices in our head, and that's not a sign of insanity or mental ill health. We all talk to ourselves in different ways and we've got that internal monologue. But I remember when I joined the army, I really wanted to be a lieutenant colonel. And then I got there and thought, all right, what am I going to do now? So, I'd achieved, it sounds potentially quite arrogant, but I'd achieved everything I wanted to achieve. So I left. Yeah. I didn't want what the future of the army had. It was great. It's a fantastic career. And I'd recommend anyone who wants to do it, go and do it. It's brilliant. No regrets whatsoever. But I'd reached that point at which I was happy and the conditions were such that I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and do some stuff outside now. So I did.
And I think this is the thing, I was told by, I can't tell it because obviously I'm me, but I was told I was a good leader and I should carry on and whatever. But maybe it was true, but it wasn't for me. And I think it is that honesty, as you say. There's also when sometimes you want to achieve something and then you do, and then you're like, and now what? Because you need the next goal. And if the next goal is not obvious, that's when you need to look elsewhere, isn't it?
It is, and that's where people like you and I come in as coaches to be able to help people make those decisions and perhaps see, open up a path that they wasn't immediately available. But also that's the time at which just to sit back, maybe enjoy that position you're in for a moment, and something will become clear to you what it is that you want to do. And if it doesn't, then maybe go back to what you wanted to do as a kid and start back thought processes. Don't apply to be a ballerina if you're in your 50s or something, but or do, why not? But have a think about what it was you wanted to do and then plot that journey back in your mind and say, do you know what, I've still got time to do something else. Let's go and do it.
I think you're never too old to a degree. There are certain things of you that, you wouldn't be, I say that. No, I think now age is not really an issue. I was just about to say, if you wanted to be a model, but actually no, because now they need models that are in their 50s or 60s or whatever. So it doesn't really matter, does it?
No, I think age is starting to drop away as an irrelevance. There are things that you need to be perhaps younger and fitter and stronger to do, but, if you're still fit and strong and you've got the mental agility to do something, crack on, go and get it, do it.
Exactly. One of the questions I had, and I know we've kind of gone past that bit, but I still think it's important. You said earlier about you need to have people following you, but how does one get that following? Because, sometimes you have to learn how to get people to follow
Yeah, sure.
you. So what would you advise people that are maybe in a new position where they have to lead and they're not sure where to start?
Yeah, that's quite a difficult one when you are, especially if you've just promoted from that same group. That body to boss transition is really difficult. Just talk to people, be open, and say, especially if you're that body to boss, speak to them and say, look, I've been new in this appointment. My plan is to do this. What do you think? Ask people their opinion, because they'll give it to you. And then if you're open and humble, now a lot of people promote and arrogance and ego and pride, those words you mentioned earlier on, start to come in, and that gets in the way. And then people will just step back and let you trip and watch you fall and go, I knew that was going to happen. Whereas if you're humble and ask people's opinion who have been there longer, when I was a young officer in the army, I was brand new, still wet behind the ears. My soldiers, who I was in command of and I led, I was the leader. I'd still ask them their opinion because they were more experienced. And then, of course, as the leader, you get all these different opinions. It is your job to take those opinions, weave a plan together, and then enact that plan. You've got to step up and lead, but you can do it in a way that is humble and takes the opinion of those around you. And then if you're likely to trip and fall, the likelihood is the team will step around you and say, do you know what? I don't think you should do that because this is likely to happen. And then you can stop, have a conversation, work out a mutual way forwards, and then you take that on as the leader, as the plan, and enact it. You'll get respect that way by listening to people. It's a truism.
About the respect side of things, one of the issues I had when I came into these positions a lot of the time was, first of all, I was female and I was the only female there. So when you're 25, 30, and you've got to manage a bunch of 60-year-olds that are ex-army, ex-police, ex-whatever, good luck with that. So you kind of got to have these conversations, but once you've earned that respect, they can do anything for you.
Yeah, and that's where the humility comes in. Personally, I don't care whether you've got sticky out bits, sticky in bits, where you come from, who you love, what color you are. I don't care about any of that. If you can do your job and you can take the team with you, and the way to do that is through humility and care and generosity and empathy and excellence, well, then you're the person for me. I genuinely don't care where you come from, or any of your likes and dislikes. Well, don't care. I do care about them. I'm not going to judge you for any of that. What I need is someone on my left hand or my right hand who's going to be able to do the job. And if you've got all of those traits and you're humble with it, then you can do the job. And if you can't, the team will help you. So
what would be, it's probably a bit of a hard question. How do you choose a leader?
That's a great question. You look for someone who is displaying the traits, the behaviors and the values that epitomize either what your organization is about or what the future of the organization needs to be about. And if someone is portraying that routinely and doing it well, then I think those are the people who you need to nurture and look at as potential leaders. Within that process, the leaders will then emerge. When you look closer, you've got to get the cohort down to a manageable size and then look at those 3, 4, half a dozen people routinely, and the leader will emerge from those.
And what about when you're kind of looking to pick a leader, but that you know nothing about, like literally recruiting someone from the outside?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's got to be in the questioning and the reporting, isn't it?
Yeah, it has. But there's some real quick wins here, actually. If you're externally recruiting into a leadership position, and we could discuss whether we call that a leadership position or a management position till the cows come home, but into a senior position, then there's some quick wins and quick questions. And I would suggest that actually ask someone of a situation where, they've had to make a decision under pressure or had to lead. Now, of course, that's a hypothetical situation, and they might come up with a story that they've heard, but it wasn't them. Mm-hmm. The way to find that out is ask what assumptions that individual made in that situation. Mm-hmm. And if they struggle with that, then they're not the leader you need. And if they can tell you what assumptions they've made, then they are well on the way to being the leader that you want and need, as long as those assumptions are sound and well constructed. If you're still unsure at that point, then ask how they validated those assumptions, because an assumption that isn't validated is just something that you wish to be true. And you can't plan on wishes and dreams. You've got to plan on validated assumptions.
What place would you say have psychometric tests and stuff like that for picking a leader?
They've got a place. I think they're very useful and very valuable, but they are like any single tool. If you rely on that one tool, then that process is flawed. Mm-hmm. They can help inform the decision, but they cannot. I use psychometrics, I use diagnostics all the time, but they cannot make the decision for you. You have to interact with people. So people who, the last person in this job was a blue person, and we've got to have a blue person in because we've got a green, a red, and a yellow. No. Fundamentally, no. You might think you need that person, but actually let's interview them as well. Let's have a chat and find out who they are and what makes them tick, because actually a team full of blues can work.
And I think sometimes it's also understanding what, why we've got certain aspects of a character. I did a test, what was it called? It was a motivational mapping or something not long ago. And my results ended up being off the chart in the freedom and free-spirited. I actually was beyond the highest that I had allowed for. But through talking about it, I could easily explain why that was and where it came from, which was from childhood, blah, blah, blah. And that still doesn't make me, despite the fact I need freedom, I still think that, you've got to know the circumstances and what's made a person that way, which is what you were saying about listening and asking questions.
Yeah, exactly. And most people who are practitioners in psychometrics and facilitators of them will agree that the psychometric outcomes change over time. It depends on what space you're at the time. It can be 3 months, 6 months, 12 years. There are some traits that don't change because they're part of us. They're part of our psyche, our makeup. But there are other elements that do change depending on the circumstances around us. And so to judge purely on a psychometric, you're only looking into a window of that person at that time.
Yeah. Well, Paul, that's nearly us for time. So can you share with us one last pearl of wisdom, please?
A pearl of wisdom?
Yeah.
Goodness me. The last thing that it just might sound a bit odd as a leader, especially an ex-army leader, is in the planning phase, actively consider failure. Mm-hmm. Well, what is going to create the failure conditions for that plan, and how do you mitigate against them? And then the other one, if I may, which is associated with that, is try not to worry too much about the uncontrollables. Mm-hmm. Too many people fret about what if this, what if that. And if it's out of your control, like COVID-19, for example, or a tsunami, let's put a contingency plan in place, but let's not worry too much about the uncontrollables. Let's focus on that which is within our gift to control, and do that bloody well.
Right, Paul, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you to everybody for listening. If you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave us a review, but more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.